You don't need knives. You don't need guns to kill a soul. All it takes is to let it stand there for a long, long time and pretend it never existed. No whips. No blood. Just a living being, still breathing, dragged away like discarded memory, then sold by the pound. No whinny. No resistance. It just stands there, as if it had died long ago, and no one cared enough to acknowledge the death. But if you dare to look deep into those eyes, you'll see. Some souls don't disappear. They're just silent, waiting for someone patient enough to remember that they once mattered. And when you see that, your heart will tighten, because you'll understand. The cruelest kind of death doesn't bleed. It comes when the whole world turns away and quietly erases a soul from human memory. If you think this is a story about healing, you're wrong. This is a scar that never closed, a whisper from the far side of the abyss, and a mirror where you're forced to confront the part of yourself that was buried alive a long, long time ago. Welcome to a story where forgetting is the ultimate death sentence, and maybe the one waiting to be saved is you. One strike of the gavel and it's over. No reason, no mercy, no need to know who he used to be. Nevada, 3 p.m. Temperatures nearing 104 degrees Fahrenheit. No one talks about the heat, because something burns hotter. The price of silence. The old auction floor stinks of sweat, rusted iron, and the rotting flesh of beings no longer called horses. Each lot herded in like defective products marked for destruction. No one looks up. Just heads down, keys clicked. The young ones go to trailers. The old ones to cold storage trucks. Still a truck, but different destinations. One ends in a riding camp. The other, a slaughterhouse. And then, Lot 78. The final name. No applause. No one asks for his age. No one even bothers to look. Just a voice. Wild stallion. Old. Untamed. No microchip. Starting bid, 43 cents per pound. A few folks flick open laptops. Someone snorts, maybe worth a couple bucks, for the bones. Ashmore is dragged in. Not walking. Dragged, like a corpse that happens to breathe. Sunken muscles. Arched spine. His mane looks scorched. Ears drooped. Eyes empty. But it's that very gaze that makes the room colder than any meat locker. Not because it's sad. Not because it's in pain. But because it has passed through fear, rage, despair. A soul once killed, but not yet dead. At the corner of the auction room, Noelle Rivers, 26, a veterinary nurse tagging along with a friend, was just about to leave. She hadn't meant to stay. Just a quick stop out of curiosity. But when Ashmore passed by, it was no longer an animal walking, but a memory floating between two worlds. And her eyes locked with a moment of death that made no sound. She forgot how to breathe. A child started crying. A man stubbed out his cigarette and stormed off. No one could explain it. But something was wrong with that horse. Not because he was sick, but because he knew. He knew he had no name. He knew he had only minutes left. He knew humans had forgotten he ever meant anything. First strike of the gavel. Second strike. Noelle had never stepped into an auction like this before. But in that moment, she stood up, lips trembling, heart pounding. She didn't know why. Only that, if that horse leaves, something inside me dies with him. A look that wouldn't let go. A soul that refused to turn away. And a woman, once proud of her strength, now knew what it felt like to be seen through. Not as a person, but as a truth. That night, Noelle didn't go home. She drove aimlessly around the desert edge of Nevada. Headlights sweeping past dry trees, dead fields, abandoned gas stations. Everything blurred behind glass fogged with breath. But nothing blurred more than that stare burned into her mind. No one had ever told her that a horse's gaze could follow you into your dreams. That a soul didn't need words to call your name, even if you never gave it one. Ashmore had looked at her. Not to be saved. Not to beg. But he had waited for her to come. And this was the deadline. She pulled over on the side of the road, hands clutching the wheel. She was shaking, not from cold, but because she knew. If she drove away and pretended nothing happened, the last living part of her would never wake again. I don't know your name. I don't know your story. I don't even know why I can't forget you when the world wants to. But I know this. You're not dead. Even if they tried to kill you with forgetfulness, with cruelty, with silence. 3:02 a.m. She turned the car around. Not because she had a plan, but because if she didn't, she'd lose herself forever. The edge of the slaughter zone. A place with no signs. No lights. Just a black tin shack in the screaming desert wind, like the howls of a world with no way out. She parked near the fence. Inside, rows of silent stalls. No neighs. No hooves. No sound of life. But she knew he was still there. Not with reason, but with something ancient that humans have long forgotten. She approached the gate. Heart about to explode. No guards. No dogs. No lights. Just wind blowing dust over the footprints of a bloodless execution. And then, she saw him. Not through movement. Not through noise. But through stillness. One stall among 12, too quiet for too long. A shadow. Standing. Not bowed. Not approaching. Not calling. Just standing. As if accepting the end. Yet refusing to disappear. Noelle gripped the bars. Ashmore didn't turn. He didn't need to. They both knew. Everything had already changed. And that's when she realized. She hadn't come to save a horse. She came to find herself. In the mirror of a soul that wouldn't die. I won't ask if you want to live. I'll only ask. If I stay, will you let me see what the world refused to? And in that quiet desert night, beneath the shadow of a creature once priced by weight, she didn't walk away. This story will not end here. It will begin right where no one thought anything could be saved. There are places that don't need blood to make your skin crawl. Sometimes, all it takes is the scent of surrender. 4:17 a.m. No one opened the gate. No cameras. Just a rusted chain looped through 2 iron bars and a crooked metal sign. No trespassing, deadly danger. Noelle pulled over onto the dirt road. Headlights off. She wasn't planning to break the law. But she wasn't planning to turn back either. She pulled out her phone and tapped the only number saved in her contacts. Oscar, an old classmate, now a temporary vet assigned to slaughter oversight. Noel? You know what time it is. I need to get inside Southern Gate. Lot 78. Lot 78? Meat horse? Why? You know where that one's headed. Which is why I can't wait for daylight. Oscar sighed on the other end. She heard drawers opening. A lock being picked. 13 minutes later, headlights appeared in the distance. Oscar stepped out in an old vet coat, badge in hand. He unlocked the gate, glanced at Noel like he'd just seen a ghost. Either you've lost your mind, or you've just stepped into hell and called out a soul that's been erased from the books. I hope you know what you're doing. Noel didn't reply. She simply nodded and walked in. Inside was a long corridor, cloaked in pitch black. No overhead lights. Only the faint glow from her phone, and the car's beams flickering down the hall, brushing against the metal bars. No voices. But not silence either. That moist, faint, chilling sound, like hoofs tapping concrete in the dark. She walked deeper. Her steps thudded against the dusty tiles. One by one, the stalls emerged like solitary confinement cells, each holding a different form, thin, maned, earless, patchy manies, trembling legs. Some couldn't even stand, collapsed in their own filth. Some had died, undiscovered. Some just stared at the wall. Oscar whispered, "You sure you're looking for something still alive in here?" Noel didn't turn. She whispered back, "I'm not looking for a creature. I'm looking for a gaze I never escaped from. The last row. No lights. No tag. A larger stall, colder. The metal door still bore handprints, as if someone had once pounded on it until they bled." Oscar lowered his voice. "Lot 78. No one dares touch it. The slaughter boys say something's just off with that one. It doesn't run. Doesn't resist. Just stands there and stares. And when it stares, you don't feel like you're looking at an animal. You feel judged." Noel clenched her fists. Her hands trembled as she reached for the gate. No sound. No whinny. No glance back. But there, standing alone in that empty, freezing stall, facing the wall, was Ashmore. Still the same. The same stillness, like time itself had stopped inside that cage. Oscar stepped back. "That's him?" Noel nodded. "You sure?" "Doesn't matter. I just need to be here." Ashmore didn't turn. But Noel knew he felt her. Because something in the silence suddenly warmed. As if her presence had brought breath into the air. A horse doesn't need to turn its head to allow someone behind it. Without fear of being hurt again, she slowed. Her chest tightened with every step. No longer a nurse. No longer Cal's daughter. No longer the woman who once believed in staying sane. She was now only a soul who heard a silent cry and came back, so no second life would be ignored. She stood 2 steps behind Ashmore. No touch. No words. No call. Because some moments, if you speak, you shatter the miracle that's happening on its own. And then a voice, not quite hers, not quite his, whispered, "I didn't choose you. You chose me, didn't you?" And for the first time since he was dragged onto that auction floor, Ashmore tilted his head, just slightly, toward Noel. Not a full turn, just a tilt, as if to say, "Finally, you remembered." Some rescues don't need screams. Sometimes, all it takes is the courage to stand beside a soul that's grown used to the dark. 5:06 a.m. Noel tightened the latch on the stall gate, clipped a temporary transport tag to the ledger. Oscar remained at the far end of the corridor, staring as if he'd just witnessed something not meant for human eyes. "You sure about this?" he asked, one last time. Noel didn't answer. She simply opened the trailer door and stepped inside, like someone who no longer had a choice. Ashmore didn't need herding. No halter. No rope. No coaxing. He walked onto the trailer on his own, one step at a time, like he'd traveled this road more than once before. The trailer door closed. The metal slammed shut with a cold clack, and the outside world disappeared. Inside, there was only darkness, the scent of rust, dried blood, and a soul standing somewhere between life and memory. Noel drove away just as the first light crept across the horizon. Not a sunrise. More like a pale curtain of light, enough to see the road, but not enough to see yourself. Ashmore stood motionless in the trailer. Didn't shift. Didn't flinch when the wheels bounced over gravel. No sounds. No whinnies. No heavy breathing. He simply stood, like the body was still here. But the soul had wandered somewhere else, and hadn't found its way back. Noel glanced at the rearview mirror. For just a second, the dim light caught his eyes. They weren't the eyes of something alive. They were the eyes of something that once knew life, but had forgotten how to name it. "You don't have to understand me," she whispered, hands tight on the wheel. "Just know I'm here." No voice answered. But the strange thing was, she didn't feel alone. Between the wind sweeping across the trailer, the rattle of the frame, and the quiet hum of a world still asleep, she knew. We are not the same, but we were both left behind by the very places we once belonged to. The road back to Cal River's ranch felt longer than usual. Not because of the distance, but because, for the first time, Noel didn't know what exactly she was bringing home. A horse? A soul? Or maybe a piece of her own memory, wrapped in scorched black skin and frozen, burning eyes? The truck came to a stop by the front gate. Her father, Cal, stood there, arms folded, eyes squinting into the pale morning light. No words. No steps forward. Just a look. As if he was trying to figure out what his daughter had dragged home from the shadows. Noel got out. She didn't explain. She just unlatched the trailer's rear door. The metal hinges creaked through the stillness. Ashmore remained still, his silhouette like a stone pillar in a world that wasn't yet ready to receive him. Cal finally spoke, his voice low and gravelly. "This, your choice?" Noel didn't turn around. "No, Dad. I didn't choose him. He chose me. By standing there. By not walking away. Even when there was nothing left to hope for." Cal said nothing. No nod. No shake. Just one sentence before he turned his back. "From here on out, he's yours. But don't expect him to live. Just because you believe in something he's long forgotten how to trust." Noel stood beside Ashmore. No lead. No commands. No pressure. And Ashmore, without knowing why, began to step forward. One step, then another. Each movement slow, heavy, but no longer the steps of something that had given up. Something was returning. Not the body, not the strength, but a flicker, faint and fragile, of something that had once burned bright and was now glowing again beneath the ash. And maybe, just maybe, that soul was never gone at all. Maybe it had just been waiting for someone with enough patience to stand there long enough for it to come back. Ashmore stood still in the yard. No roaring, no pulling on the lead, no stomping, just breathing, slow, steady, as if even the air here was testing whether he still deserved to stay alive. Noelle stood beside him, her hands not holding a halter. She wasn't leading him. She was just present. On the porch, Cal Rivers stepped down, one creaking stair at a time. His hand wore a weathered black leather glove. The old cowboy hat still sat on his head, not because he cared about style, but because he no longer had anything left to take off. Morning wind swept across the dry dust. Ashmore didn't blink. Neither did Cal. One was a man who used to ride horses to survive. The other, a creature who once survived because someone rode with him. Now both just stood there, like statues being eroded by time. Noelle broke the silence first. I brought him home. Used my savings. Not a cent of yours. Good, Cal replied, his eyes never leaving Ashmore. You know I'm going to disagree with this. I don't disagree, he said, his voice dry as desert wind. Because from now on, that horse has nothing to do with me. Noelle swallowed hard. Not because of his words, but because she'd just seen something in her father's eyes that mirrored Ashmore's. Just moments ago. Cal stepped closer, until only 4 strides separated him from the horse. He didn't stop out of fear. He stopped because there's something in this horse that shouldn't be broken again. Noelle spoke softly. I know about Mom. The accident that year. I know it wasn't your fault. It was, he said flatly. It was my fault. Because I believed a shattered horse could still be saved. Your mother believed me. The horse didn't. And your mom died out there on the prairie. Because I couldn't let go of a soul that had already let go of itself. No one said anything after that. Ashmore still hadn't moved. But his chest rose and fell, just a little heavier than before. Noelle looked her father in the eyes. So this time, if that soul chooses to stay, will you give it a chance? Cal was silent. A faint shimmer crossed his eyes. No one could say if it was a tear, or just a trick of the morning light. He stepped back. Turned away. The old stall on the left still has some dry straw. If he lies down, then he's chosen to live. If not, don't expect me to dig the grave. And he walked back to the porch. Each step landing like a stone dropped on stone. No more words. No questions. Not even a glance back. Noelle turned to Ashmore. No force. No directions. She simply opened the gate and stepped aside. Ashmore looked at her for the first time. Not long. Not clearly readable. But long enough for her to know something had opened. A door. To a place far away. He hadn't dared to return to since the day they dragged him onto that auction floor. And inside the house, behind an old, foggy window, Cal stood there, silent, just watching the old stall, where once he'd placed his trust in a soul, and lost his wife forever. Not everyone who calls your name is someone you want to answer. Only when your soul believes the other person won't walk away. Do you dare make that first, fragile move? Day 4. Same old stall. Same girl with the same small wooden chair. Same horse, turned away. But today, there was something Noelle had never done before. She said his name. Not like you'd call a pet. Not with a wave and a "come here, Ashmore," but a quiet whisper, as if speaking to a part of herself she'd long forgotten. Ashmore. Desert wind slipped through the cracks in the stall wall, lifting strands of straw. No reply. But his ear twitched. Noelle held her breath. Her heart raced, faster than her first night on an emergency shift. She didn't say anything more. Just repeated it, this time slower, softer, as if calling back a part of his soul that had been lost. Ashmore. Right ear twitched. Left ear tilted, just slightly. He didn't turn. But he was no longer still. And it felt like the whole world, frozen for so long inside that stall, had just heard the final whisper of a soul that was still alive. That night, Noelle left later than usual. When she stood, Ashmore still didn't turn. But as she stepped outside the stall, he turned his head. Just a little. Just enough for his left eye to fall into her line of sight. And she knew he had heard his name. For the very first time. The first time after years of being referred to by weight, by number, or by nothing at all. Some wounds don't bleed, because the blood dried long before anyone had the patience to look. Morning of day 5. Noelle entered the stall earlier than usual. In her hands, a warm towel, a soft brush, and a bowl of clean water. Ashmore was still in his usual spot. But his body wasn't as tense. Still facing away. But no longer rigid. His frame seemed to have granted space for another being to exist nearby. Noelle knelt. She gently placed the warm cloth along his neck. Ashmore flinched, but didn't pull away. She thought, sometimes, letting someone near is the only way to fight back against what once broke you. She began to brush him. Slowly. Each stroke stripped away layers of dust, like time itself being washed from a forgotten body. Until she reached his left side, near the ribs. Her hand paused. A scar. Large. Rough. Jagged stitches in white nylon, sloppy, uneven. Not a veterinarian's stitch. Not the kind that saves. But the kind meant to hide something. Something that had carved straight through the soul. Noelle didn't gasp. She didn't ask questions. She just hovered her hand above the edge of the scar, without touching it. Her fingers trembled. What did they do to you? Her voice cracked in her throat. Not from shock, but from a pain too sharp to speak through. Ashmore didn't move. Just exhaled, hard. As if even the scar remembered. Noelle sat down on the floor. Her back rested against the stall boards. She couldn't bring herself to look at the wound again. Not because she was afraid, but because she knew. He would only let the first person see that wound, if he believed they wouldn't turn away. And she hadn't. Some wounds live longer than memory, because they don't just scar the body. They carry a curse. No one wants to see this. But that day, someone did look. Didn't ask. Didn't walk away. Didn't sit down to save him. But to acknowledge. You're not just a horse. You're a piece of memory the whole of humanity tried to forget. Sometimes, what brings a soul back to life isn't food. It's a hand, patient enough that even hunger feels respected. Morning of day 6. Clear skies. No wind. Nothing unusual, except that Noelle brought a carrot. She didn't try. She didn't lure. She just sat, as always. The carrot rested in her open left palm, upward, exposed, like an invitation without demand. Ashmore looked. Not long. Not blinking. Just placed his gaze on the carrot, then turned away. Noelle didn't flinch. She whispered, "It's okay. You can say no. As long as you know. I won't pull my hand away." 5 minutes. 10. 13. Nothing. And then Ashmore took a step. Not fast. Not strong. But the soft clink of his hoof against the floor sounded like a heartbeat returning after years in a coma. She didn't move. He took another half step. A long, broken breath escaped from deep in Ashmore's throat. His neck lowered. And for the first time, his cracked, dry lips touched her hand. The carrot was gone. She didn't see him eat it. All she knew, in that moment, was that she was the one who came undone. Tears welled up before she could stop them. Not from pride. Not from joy. But because someone had chosen life. Even though no one had asked them to. From afar, Cal stood beneath the porch awning, arms folded, eyes narrowed. Didn't think I'd see the day. And he turned back inside, hiding the fact that his eyes had turned a little red. Some storms don't come to drown you. They come to test which souls are strong enough to hold someone's gaze without looking away. Night of day 6. The sky split in half. Thunder rolled like a beast awakening underground. Rain poured, not gently, but like the sky was emptying all it had held through the drought. Noelle jolted awake. Not from thunder, but because her heart knew someone was calling out for her. She threw on a raincoat and ran into the dark. Ashmore was still in the stall. Not panicking. Not making a sound. Just standing near the gate, very close. As if waiting for someone to either open it or leave. Noelle didn't speak. She stood 2 steps away. Rain pelted her face. Her hair soaked. Her mouth quiet. Only her eyes, watching. Ashmore looked back. This time, he looked straight into hers. No flinching. No bowing. Not a plea. Not a question. Not hope. Just, if you're still standing there, I won't die tonight. And she stood. Didn't speak. Didn't open her arms. Didn't beg. Just stood. Like a single candle in the middle of a storm. Ashmore stepped back. Then moved forward again until his head gently touched the wooden beam. No rubbing. No noise. Just a touch. As if someone had said, "I trust you." In a language without words. And then, the storm quieted. Not because the rain stopped, but because two shattered souls had found each other, without breaking what was left. Not everyone who runs is trying to escape. Sometimes, running is the only way for a soul to ask, "Do I still exist?" The next morning, Cal left the paddock gate open. No reason given. No questions asked. Noel walked Ashmore out. No halter. No saddle. Just side by side, like two shadows walking in silence. Ashmore stopped in the center of the open field. Wind blew. Sunlight warmed his back. No one chased. No one called. She simply said, "If you want to, this can be your first time. If you're scared, I'm still right here." Ashmore looked at the land, then at her. It wasn't the look of an animal. It was the look of someone who had just woken from 10 years of being buried alive. And then he ran. Not like a frightened horse. No bolting. No whinny. Just a glide. Light as dust. Then building. Wind whipped through his mane. His hoofs hit the ground like drums of the resurrected. Dust curled behind his tail. The earth split beneath each step. Cal stood on the porch, bit the edge of his hat, muttered, "He remembers." Ashmore reached the far end of the paddock, then turned. Not tired. Not wild. Just a look. A smile, with his eyes sent toward the girl in sunlight, still too breathless to breathe. And Noel, for the first time, cried in broad daylight. Not because he could run again, but because he had proven he was still a soul. Not killed. Just buried. Some people don't use whips to hurt. They use words. But if you've ever been broken by words, you'll know. A silent gaze can be the most devastating kind of retaliation. Saturday morning. Clear skies. The paddock freshly raked. Ashmore stood in the sun, his mane still tangled, but his eyes no longer clouded. A pickup truck pulled up to the ranch gate. Tom Claiborne, old farrier, Cal's longtime friend. The man who once taught Cal how to saddle a horse, trim a hoof, pick bloodlines. His voice was loud, his stare sharp, and his mouth always ran faster than his heart. Cal didn't introduce Ashmore. Didn't need to. Tom took one look and burst out laughing. "That thing? That sooty beast is what your daughter emptied your savings for? I thought it was a walking chunk of coal." Cal said nothing. Noel bit her lip hard. Tom circled once, spat his candy out onto the dirt. Left legs weak. Shoulders uneven. Skittish mind. No saddle, no bit? That one's only good for one thing. Compost with wild blood. Ashmore stood a few feet away. Didn't move. Didn't toss his head. Didn't turn away. He just lifted his head and looked. A look. Not angry. Not sad. Just deep enough that Tom suddenly fell silent. Because those weren't the eyes of a horse. They were the eyes of someone who had lived through war and had nothing left to prove about surviving it. Tom scratched his head, gave a sheepish laugh. "Come on now, I was just joking. Just a joke. That horse, he just doesn't know who he used to be." Noel spoke softly, just loud enough for Tom to hear. "He knows. The world's just not ready to admit it." Ashmore turned his head. Didn't bolt. Didn't retreat. He simply looked away. Because he knew some people don't deserve to be looked at for long. You never truly know how terrified a soul is until you show it the very thing that once imprisoned it. That afternoon, Noel brought an old bridle into the stall. Not to use. Just to hang it on a hook. Just to let Ashmore see the symbol of the past without being shoved back into it. But the moment she lifted her hand, the bridle not yet on the wall, Ashmore changed. He let out a hoarse, guttural roar, not a whinny. His whole body contracted. Eyes wide, rolled white. Hind legs slammed the wall. Blood splattered from his front hoof before Noel could even understand what was happening. She took one step back. The stall door flew open from the force. Dust exploded. Ashmore slammed his head into the wooden frame, as if trying to shatter the air that had once suffocated him. Cal sprinted to the gate. "Get out, Noel! He's lost it!" But she didn't move. She stood still, right there in the middle of the stall. Eyes open. Hands steady. She didn't drop the bridle. She took one step forward. Onto dirt stained with blood and dust. Ashmore stopped. Panting. Shaking. She raised her hand, not to his side, but to his forehead, where the old scar lay. "I'm not forcing you. Never will. But I also won't run. Because I know what you fear isn't the bridle. It's that no one ever stayed long enough to listen to your panic." Ashmore trembled. His breath slowed. Eyes wide. No longer frantic. Just silent. Raw. Exhausted. Noel pulled the bridle to her chest. Sat down in the middle of the stall, beside him. Blood soaked into the straw beneath his hoof. Sweat dripped from her brow, soaking into the cracked wood floor. No one said a word. But, for the first time, fear no longer filled the whole room. And from the loft above, Cal looked down and saw a horse no longer fighting, but learning how to stand still inside the storm of his own memory. Not everyone who leaves wants to be gone. Some souls, they just need to test, to see if anyone will really stay. 3:28 a.m. The first sound came like an offbeat heartbeat. Then hooves. Snapping wood. Scattering straw. Breaths, long, sharp, silent. Noel jolted awake. Her flashlight hit the floor. She rushed out to the stall. The paddock gate was blown open. Barbed wire whipped loose. Ashmore, gone. The wind howled. Thunder cracked. No rain yet, but the cold sliced through her like her heart was being stripped bare in a breathless desert. Ashmore had left. No one knew why. No one saw him run. No one heard a single whinny. Just silence. As if he had never been there at all. Cal stood behind her, holding a lantern. Eyes red, voice gruff. "It's not your fault. Some horses, they come just to be seen. Not to stay." Noel didn't hear him. She was already out the gate. No coat. No shoes. Bare hands pushing through thorns. Her voice tore through the dark. "Ashmore. Ashmore. Please don't. Don't make me believe there's no one left strong enough to stay." The wind screamed louder. Sand whipped the air. First rain sliced her face like tiny blades. But Noel didn't stop. She searched all night. Across the low grass fields. Through narrow canyons where the wild herds once ran. past the rock bluff where her mother used to rest at dusk. No hoof prints. No breath. Just her voice. Falling into the dark with no one there to catch it. By dawn, her voice was raw. Feet bleeding. Knees torn. But she kept walking. Kept calling. Not to bring Ashmore back, but to tell the sky, the earth, and every wandering soul. She hadn't given up. 5:56 a.m. The rain still fell in light sheets. No sunrise. The wind still carried the scent of wet soil and broken grass. Noelle walked back, spine curved from the cold. Heart hollow like a letter returned with no address. She passed the gate. Crossed the yard. Reached the stall. And then she stopped. Ashmore. Standing there. Right in front of the stall door. Not wet. Not shaking. Just standing. No heavy breathing. No scanning the horizon. Just looking straight at her. No one knew how he returned. No hoofbeats. No new tracks. Only a horse, who had once walked away, now stood exactly where he had left, as if he had never left at all. Noelle collapsed to her knees, not from exhaustion, but because she couldn't breathe through the flood in her chest. Rain mixed with tears. She whispered, not knowing if it was to him or to herself. "I don't know why you came back, but thank you for showing me that if trust runs deep enough, it will find its way home." Ashmore lowered his head. Slowly. Gently. Still. Like a bow. Or an apology. Or maybe a thank you. From a soul that never learned how to speak. From the upstairs window, Cal murmured to himself, "No one can call a horse back like that. Unless that girl's soul got lost once, too." Some decisions aren't made to win. They're made to prove that something once thrown away deserves to be seen in the spotlight. One late autumn morning, Noelle sent an email. Red Canyon Horse Revival Show. Entry name, Ashmore. Category, free movement ritual, no saddle, no whip. Cal said nothing when he heard. Just took a sip of coffee and stared out the window. Minutes passed like lifetimes. Then he set the mug down and muttered, "If you believe, then I'll believe. But be ready to lose him all over again." Noelle nodded. No trembling. No fear. Because this time, she knew. Faith isn't something you bet on. It's something you survive on. Not everything beautiful needs to be technical. Some performances. One simple bow is enough to make the whole world cry. Show day. Red Canyon Arena, where Cal once won gold 2 decades ago. Now, the wood bleachers were cracked, the banners renamed. But the smell of hay and horse sweat hadn't changed. The stands were packed. National broadcast. No one knew Ashmore. No one bet on a horse with no saddle, no whip, no pedigree. If that thing even makes it into the arena, it'll be a miracle. Look at him, black, scarred, trembling. What's he gonna do? And then Ashmore stepped out. Slowly. No halter. No lead. Just Noelle beside him until the edge of the ring. Then she stopped. Ashmore walked to the center of the arena and stood still. No running. No circling. No tricks. He bowed. One simple motion. So deep, so honest. The entire arena fell silent. 5 seconds. No laughter. No whispers. No understanding. Just a soul, once killed by neglect, now standing beneath lights, choosing not to make a scene. And then, the crowd exploded. One clap. Then dozens. Then thousands. Then tears. Then gasps. I've never seen a horse make me feel like I'm being forgiven. Cal stood behind the railing, his hand over his chest. Said nothing. But he knew. Ashmore wasn't performing. He was remembering. As a ritual for those who had once been forgotten. After the show, Noel received a letter. Equihope Project. A therapy program for veterans and traumatized children. Ashmore isn't just a horse. He's the language people in pain didn't know they needed. Cal read the letter. Gave a slow nod. If he can help someone else, then maybe his life was never meaningless. Ashmore didn't understand the words. But when Noel tucked the letter against his neck and said, "We're going to help others," he lifted his head. Didn't whinny. Just stood. Like he was ready. Colorado Therapy Ranch. A boy named Levi, 9 years old. Speechless for 3 years after losing his father, a war veteran. No one could reach him. No one could make him speak. The day Ashmore arrived, Levi hid in the corner of the paddock. Ashmore didn't look. Didn't approach. He just turned his back and waited. Hours later, Levi walked over, placed his hand gently on Ashmore's forehead, right on the scar. No one said a word. No one expected anything. And then, a tiny voice escaped. "He understands me." The therapists froze. Noel covered her mouth. Cal turned away, wiping his eyes. Levi cried. Not from grief, but because, for the first time, someone didn't need to ask to understand what he couldn't say. Back at the ranch. Late afternoon. A light breeze. Ashmore ran with the children, as if he had never known what captivity was. Noel stood beside Cal, her hand resting on the old wooden fence. No words. Then Cal spoke. "Looks like we didn't save that horse." Noel turned, smiling softly. "No. He saved us. And that was the end. A horse once sold like trash. A girl who thought she was just a small-town nurse. A man who thought he had lost everything. All brought home, not by destiny, but by a soul that never had a voice. You can hold a soul with a halter, but only when you let it go. Do you truly learn whether it will return or become itself at last? Dawn. The last day of autumn. No wind. No fog. No roosters crowing. Just pale sunlight brushing the ridgeline. Beyond it, an open stretch of land. And a wild herd waiting like the shadow of a dream long forgotten. Ashmore stood beside Noel. No rope. No gate. No stall. The scar on his neck, no longer a wound. Just a mark. The kind carried by those who have come back from the dead. Noel opened the paddock gate one last time. The creek it made wasn't for a horse to pass through. It was for a soul, once caged by broken trust. She whispered, barely audible, "You owe me nothing. If you want to go, go. Because I know True freedom isn't running away from someone. It's returning to who you truly are. Ashmore didn't flinch. He stepped forward, slowly, as if walking across the very threshold of his past, until there were no fences, no people, only wind, and the open sky. From the base of the hill, the wild herd appeared. 6 horses, black eyes, manes dancing in the wind. They stood still, as if waiting for one who had once strayed, once been caged by humans, once been rejected by the world itself. Ashmore stopped. He didn't look at the herd. He didn't look at the sky. He turned and looked at Noel. No whinny. No gallop back. No bowed head. Just a gaze. Deep. Still. So deep it told her everything she needed to know. I'm not leaving you behind. I'm choosing to go. Because you kept your promise. You gave a soul its freedom back. Noel nodded. No tears. Only your lips moved. You're not abandoning me. You're just finding yourself again. And so, Ashmore turned and ran. No regret. No panic. No looking back. He ran like the final note of a symphony that was never written, but always meant to be heard. His mane flew. The wind roared. Dust rose behind him like a soul untethered. He joined the herd. No one stopped him. No one held him. Up on the ridge, 7 black silhouettes faded, then dissolved into the sun. Noel stood by the old wooden fence. Her hand rested on the same post, where Ashmore had once pressed his forehead to hers. Cal stepped beside her, said nothing. Noel smiled, eyes distant. You know, Dad, not everyone who leaves us is abandoning us. Some just need permission to return to themselves. And that was the end. No applause. No medals. No fairy tale ending. Just silence. The same silence that opened this story. But this time, that silence was freedom. No more fear. No more cages. Just one wild soul. Finally whole. Ashmore is gone. But the story doesn't end here. Because maybe what was healed wasn't just a soul once dragged through a slaughter auction, but the parts of us that the world once decided weren't worth keeping. We've all been Ashmore at some point. Never called by our names. Never asked what we feared. Just standing there, waiting for someone to see us and not walk away. But perhaps that is life's deepest lesson. You can't save every soul, but if you stand still long enough and listen deep enough, maybe you'll help someone remember who they were meant to be. And sometimes, to save yourself, you have to find the courage not to turn away from the things that once hurt. The lesson today? Not every wild soul needs to be tamed. Some just need to be given back their right to exist. And sometimes, the most beautiful thing isn't making them stay, but setting them free to return to who they truly are. If this story left you speechless, if it made you see the world with softer eyes, don't let it end in silence. Please like, share, and subscribe to Gallop of Glory, where forgotten souls are told back into the light. Because not everyone who leaves disappears. Some souls just need someone to believe. They're still here. Thank you for staying until the very end. And if you feel unseen right now, please remember, we tell these stories to find you and to remind you you're not alone.